Hello, welcome. In this video, we're going to look at group by methods in Pandas. Group by is a very commonly used method in Pandas. Let me close this. And we're going to have very simple examples, starting from the basics using like the tips dataset, and then we'll import more datasets as we seem fit. So let's first import the tips dataset. So I'm going to type the code here. So if we visualize the head of this, we see that in this data set, we have the total bill, the tips, the sex, the smoker, the day, the time, and the size. Now, this is a data set that just has information about, people that visit a particular restaurant and the amount of tip they provide, their total bill, the gender of the person providing the tip, if the person is a smoker or not, what day of the week is it, what time is it dinner, and what is the size. A group by is used for aggregating continuous data based on categorical data. So let's look at the info here. Now you'd see that we have all this as floats. So your total bill and your tip floats. Sex, smoker, day, time are all object or what you'd call categorical in this case. And then the size is an integer. So of course you can't have a fractional number of people at a restaurant like 1.5. It has to be an integer. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, things like that. For each of these categorical, let's look at the number of unique occurrences and the unique count. So for that, we could easily just do something very simple. We can select only the categorical types and do something about it. So let's do df.columns. So here we can use a simple for loop for column name in. We'll create an empty list. Save ourselves the time by just copying this. We're going to get time. I think this should be fine. 4 of them. Yes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. Copy it into our list. So we want to see the number of unique occurrences in each of this. So we can say data frame. We're going to index it by the column name. Remember, it's going to... Oh, my bad. It shouldn't be in a string. And we want to see its unique values there. So we can wrap this in a print statement so that we see it printed out. And we can also print the column name so we know what we're looking at as we go through the for loop. Okay, let's do this. And we can also show the value count. So print df call name dot value count. Thank you for auto completing that. And yeah, this should be good. Let's just print something like a line. Of course, I'm trying to use print so that even if you copy this code into a Python environment and not Jupyter Notebook, it will still run without an issue. So we could probably wrap all of this in print as well. Let's just get a general idea of what the categories look like. Okay, my bad. That's not supposed to be there. Okay, good. So we see for the sex column, the unique occurrences are male and female, and if we look at the value counts, we have 157 male occurrences and this number of female occurrences. For smoker, we see that it's yes or no, and we have this many that belong to no and this many that belong to yes. Day of the week, we have Sunday, Saturday, Thursday, Friday, and these are the occurrences gotten from the value counts. And we also have dinner versus lunch, and we have this. Group by can really help us a lot in looking at several summary statistics. So let's as we want to find what is the average tip given by the different gender. So let's type that here. Just as an example of why you might want to use group by. What is the average tip provided by the different gender? For this, we're going to call data frame. We're now going to get the gender column. So I like to use square brackets because if we run this real quick, we'll see what we get. So then we can go ahead and just call the group by since we know what that looks like. Group by. Let's select only the tip and the gender. So let's do .lock, square brackets. And we have talked about lock in the past, so you could watch other videos. We want all the rows, that's what the column means, comma, but we only want to select column. So we want the sex column, obviously, because that's what we want to group by. And we also want the tip. Is it called tip or tips? Let me see real quick. Yeah, tip. Great. Okay. And now we want to group it by sex. So if we run this, nothing's going to happen. Let me show you. But what you see is you see data frame group by objects. That's a special object. For you to have an output, group bys are useful when you are able to aggregate it with some summary statistic or some function that does some magic. So for this, we want to see the average, which is the mean. So we'll just call the mean, and that is it. So if you look at this, this is the average tip for male versus female. And we see in this data set, the males tend to tip on average more than the females. Now you might want to, get the same output, but in a case where you have it in a more flat structure, right? Because you can see here you have this more like the label, and then this is the actual value, but you might not want that. You might want it to be flattened out. For this, we'll use the reset index function. So it essentially does what it says it does, which is it resets the index. So what if we're not interested in just the tip? Maybe we're interested in, let's say, the total bill, right? Let's say, for example, we want to see the median tip by the gender. Okay, so let's do this. Let's just copy this. Let's say change this to median. Okay, so what that means is we're just going to do, let me run this again so it shows properly. We're going to get all of this, and instead when it comes to calling the mean, we'll call the median. Okay, so let's type it again slowly, this time walking through it step by step. We are only concerned with the tip and the gender. Now we could include everything as long as it doesn't blow stuff up, that's fine. But let's do it step by step. So let's say dataframe.lock. Remember the LOC function. We want all the rows. That's what we put a colon for. We put a comma saying, okay, we're done specifying the number of rows. Now I want to specify the columns that we're interested in. Now, because we don't want just one column, we're going to call a list. Now, if it's just one column, you can put it as a string, but I always advise I put it in a list instead. It just makes it look more, I feel it just looks better when you do it that way. I might be wrong. So if we say the sex, right? We're not only interested in that, we also want the tip. So we call the tip as well. If we run this, this is what it gives us. It gives us a smaller subset of the data frame, which contains only the sex and the tip. Great. Now we want to group by something. In this case, we want to group by the sex, right? So let's do group by. I like to put things in a list when I can. So if we run this, nothing happens. Because remember, with every group by statement, there must always be a following statistic or aggregator function, right? Whatever it is. Great. So let's call, in this case, median. Okay, of course, if you don't want it to look like this, you can always call the reset index behind it, and that's fine. Cool. Now, what if you don't want just the mean and the bin there, and you want to look at everything, like the minimum, the maximum, all of that? Now, Pandas has a special AGG function, short for aggregation function. So let's look at that. Let's create something to describe what we're doing here. Okay, so we come here, we do this. What's the average tip provided by the different gender? Okay, so we can easily do this. Let's change this. Let's just say what is the, let's say, okay, some statistic for tip. So for this, I've explained how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this so we can save ourselves the time. And we'll paste it here. Now, instead of just supplying the mean and the median, you can call the AGG function. Now, in there, you provide a list of things you want. So we want the mean to be calculated. We want the minimum to be calculated. We want the maximum to be calculated. We want the, let's say, standard deviation. I think this is fine. We can do this. Mean, max. Okay, let's also include the median as well, right? Why not? Median. Okay, run this. Now what you see is right here, it calculates everything, every single thing we put in this aggregation function that we call upon the group by object. Because remember, all of this is a group by object, but it's not going to show you anything until you call a kind of aggregator function on it. Now in this case, we are calling several. We want the minimum, we want the maximum, we want the average or the mean, we want the standard deviation, and we want the median value. When we look at the average value here for male and female, we see on average, men in this data set provide more tip than female. Now, when we look at the median, we see the same pattern. So, median is not affected by presence of outliers. So, it's always good when you look at the median. Now, if you look at the maximum value for both of them, the maximum tip given by a male person in this data set is 10, let's say dollars. It might be something else, might be pounds. We don't know. Let's just assume it's dollars. The maximum for a female is 6.5. So this just shows you how you can do group by. So group by is not just useful when you want to look at just one categorical dimension, as I would like to call it. You might want to look at categorical dimension as well as several of them. So let's say we want it to be broken down by gender and your smoking habits. So let's do something here. Let's put a mark down. How does the tip vary by gender and smoking habits? Okay, so how does the tip vary by gender and smoking habits? Great. So we're going to do the same thing with slight difference. Now remember, whenever you want to do a group by, you need to specify whatever you want to group by, very funny, has to exist in the data set. So what we're going to do first is we're going to use the lock. You could use ilock if you want. I like lock because just more intuitive to me. So we'll do it again. df.lock square brackets. Okay. We want to specify row, comma, columns. We want all the rows. So we just put a column there saying give me all the rows. Comma mean we're done specifying the rows. Now give me the columns. Since it's columns, not column, you want a list. So we put a list there. We say sex, okay, we say smoker, we say tip. So if we run this, what do we get? We get a subset of the original data frame, which is the original data frame. We have tip, smoke, all that stuff. We can now break it down further. Let's say, okay, now we want to group by sex and smoker, because you might want to ask yourself, okay, well, do smokers give more tip than non-smokers? We don't know, but we're about to find out. So we call the group by function. We provided a list. In this case, now we can provide it by smoker, if I can spell smoker correctly, and then this. Great. Of course, if we run this, nothing's going to happen. So let's see, as usual, let's do the average. Now you see, first of all, it says, okay, smoker, yes or no. So for no, we see that even when we break this down, let me zoom in a little bit so we can all see this properly. We see that even when we break this down by smoker and gender, we see men on average give more tip than females in this data set, I'd like to say. And yeah, we see how we've broken it down. So let's look at the female dimension for not the smoker versus a smoker. We see smoker females tend to give on average a higher tip than non-smoker females. Okay, how does that look like for male? So if we look at the male for non-smoker male, theirs is higher than smoker male on average. Now we already know that the average is not the full picture. How about the median, right? Because the average or the mean can be impacted by presence of outliers, which of course we didn't check, but it is a thing that can happen. So let's say the median. Let's see if we see the same thing. So for the median, we see smoker females they still give a higher tip than non-smoker females, which is interesting. So if you're a bartender, you want to be the one that is serving a female smoker, because looks like statistically you're about to get more tip than a non-smoker female. How about the male? In this case, we see that things are a little different. So when we look at the median for smoker male, the median value is higher than non-smoker male. But if we look at the average, it's lower for smoker male. So you start to see that, the mean and the median are not just, there are two important things that you need to look at if you want to understand how, a data is distributed. So let's copy this and just do everything. So we have the minimum, maximum using the aggregate function here. Now we can easily do this. So let's just copy this, save ourselves the time from having to type it. Let's do this. Okay, now let's look at everything. So smoker females, we see when we look at the maximum value for the tip for smoker female, 6.5 is higher than for non-smokers. We see that the median value is higher for smoker females versus non-smoker. We see that the average is also higher. So we can say, kind of conclusively that female smokers in this data set tend to give a better tip. Great. Next, we can look at for the male smoker versus non-smoker. So when we look at the male smoker, the average is lower, not too much, not by much. It's 3.05 and that's 3.11. The minimum is, is lower here for the smoker versus the non-smoker. The maximum is higher for the smoker male versus the non-smoker male, which is at the 9. So the median ends up being higher for the smoker male versus the non-smoker. But when you look at the mean, it's a different story, So, that comes to different things, right? So, but here, what we've been able to do is to show that whenever you use the group by, you can actually group by several dimensions. Now, we could decide to take this further and, look at things like, okay, well, we've looked at this gender, we've looked at the smoker. We could also look at the day of the week and the time, right? Or we could just pick one of them, or we could pick all of them. So let's look at day of the week. Ask ourselves a question: what impact does day of the week have on this? Let's say, what impact does day of the week have on tip size, considering the gender and smoking habits of person giving the tip? So I'm going to do the same thing here, but I'm going to save us some time by copying this, a lot of this. So let's put this here. Let's include our day as well. So comma, day. All right, let's do this. Now I want to group by day, smoke, gender. So let's do this. We're going to copy this group by statement and modify it here. Save ourselves the time to type. Okay, let's just do comma. We do day. And let's look at the average. Okay. All right. Good. So what day has the highest average tip for female smokers? So we can look at it. Female smoker is 2.66 for Friday. Female smoker 2.88. Okay, that's already 2.87 rather. That's already higher. Sunday is a 3.5 on average. Thursday is kind of in the middle. So we see that Sunday has, the highest average tip for the female smoker. How about the female non-smoker? Is it the same thing as well? So female non-smoker 3.12, 2.7. This is higher. Sunday 3.3. Okay. 2.5. Okay. So Sunday for the non-smoker female, the tip is on average higher. Okay, how about males? Let's say the male smoker. So smoker, yes, male. It's 3.5 on a Sunday, 2.8, 2.7. What is this? 3. Okay. So on a Sunday, the average tip is higher for male smokers. How about the non-smoking male? It's 3.11, 3.2. Okay, slightly higher on a Saturday. Nope. Okay, the highest is on a Saturday. So you can start to see the power of group by and how it can actually help us dice through our data set. I'd like you to, on your own, try to see what other insights you can get. But I think we've touched quite a bit on group by. Now, there are other things you can do with group by. Here, we just focused on, statistical measurements. So like the mean, median, maximum, minimum, standard deviation, things like that. But there are lots of other functions you can actually use. So like the first, the last, different things whenever you're working with group by. Now, just one key thing to remind you about is, whenever you do your group by, it's going to give you like a multi-index pandas data frame. If you don't want that kind of output, or if that output is not going to help you with what you're trying to do, then you can go ahead and call the reset function, reset index function, and it's going to flatten it out this way where, you can do more analysis this way. So let me just copy that and show you what it's going to do here. I remember in Pandas, you're allowed to chain your functions. So let's just add this here. Okay, you see it essentially just flattens it out this way, such that, you know, you could take this information and maybe do some other visualization from it or whatever it is, different things you can do. I'd also want to show something as well. Let's look at the count. Count is also important. So maybe let's see what days where we have most people coming in. So we've looked at main and all of this, but we haven't talked about count. So let's look at count and see what it gives us. We see that we have the highest on a Sunday non-smoker female. 43 of them actually come out on that day. Saturday, you know, you can start to see, okay, for each of the days of the week and broken down by the dimension of smoker and gender, we can have a count on this. But you see that there's an issue because here we did a count, but because we looked at the tip, here we're just counting number of rows or the number of people that essentially came. And so we might want to rename this so that it's not misleading. So for that, we could just do one more thing and chain a rename function on top of this. So we're going to rename tip as count because that's essentially what it is. So let's do rename. We'll put a dictionary. In the dictionary, specify the old name tip, column the new name, which we want is count. We specify that we want the axis to be the column axis. Columns, I believe. Yeah, columns. And if we run this, it does that. So now this is much more representative of what we want to do. In this video, we learned about group by, we learned about count, reset index, rename function, cool stuff like that. So I want to challenge you. I'm going to push this code to the repository. You can download this code, you know, with the data set and actually play around with it, get comfortable with it, ask yourself different questions and see what you actually learn from it using the group by. Thank you for your time and I'll see you in the next video.